Hi, I'm Professor Putnam, and I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of concepts that you may have noticed being a part of our Week 1 discussions and also are going to be in your Week 2 readings. The first of those regards the triple bottom line, which is basically something unique to environmental science, which is a way of thinking about uh, not just trying to figure out what's best for the environment when we're doing research, but how can we balance what's best for the environment with economic issues and social issues. I like to think of this as the sort of an analogy with the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is kind of knowing facts. Knowledge is having facts. Wisdom is being able to apply those facts to real world situations to come up with a good solution to a problem. That's kind of how environmental science might differ from some other scientific disciplines. Whereas we're not really trying to just determine what are the facts. We're trying to work with policymakers to figure out how do we apply those facts to the world that we live in to try to come up with solutions to problems. So that's kind of what the triple bottom line is all about. The other issue is, which I think is really interesting for yourself to consider maybe philosophically, is the difference between Cassandras and cornucopians. It's kind of two different ways of looking at the world, and those are kind of weird words to use. I'm not sure why they chose to use those words. You could almost say, the difference between optimists and pessimists with regard to environmental issues. But it's a little more specific than that. And the way that it's more specific is that, and I really think you have to recognize that people just have different points of view with regard to how the world is set up. So the cornucopians would think that the world is set up in such a way that through human ingenuity we can basically solve any problem, even problems that we get ourselves into. Whereas Cassandras might say the world is set up in such a way to sort of expose our, human nature, the problems with human nature, so that when we try to solve problems, ultimately, if we take shortcuts, they're going to come back to bite us. So Cassandras would say that, for example, something like the Green Revolution, it saved a lot of lives, especially initially, but is it sort of creating a kind of fragility in the world that is ultimately going to become our undoing? Is it a shortcut in how to produce food that's ultimately going to undo us? So Cassandras would say that technologically speaking, we're eventually going to come to the end of our own ingenuity, and we won't be able to solve further problems. They'll come back to bite us in some sort of apocalyptic scenario. Cornucopians would say that ultimately, through human ingenuity, we're going to be able to, or we could, solve all the problems that present themselves to us with regard to environmental issues. Kind of an interesting dichotomy to consider, and some of you will find yourself believing a little bit of both. It's like you hope that the best in human nature will come through and will be able to solve these problems. So there's some optimism, but there's also pessimism that in human nature there are some fundamental flaws that could come back to bite us.